It was supposed to be just another quiet Saturday in the town of Fairview, a small, wooded suburb in Oregon where people left their doors unlocked and everyone knew everyone else's business. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon, casting a soft orange hue over the rooftops and dew-covered lawns. 13-year-old Lily Harmon was already awake, tying her sneakers in the hallway while her golden retriever Max wagged his tail beside her. Lily was the kind of girl neighbors always described as kind and thoughtful beyond her years. She helped the elderly couple across the street bring in their groceries, baked cookies with her mom every Sunday, and spent hours sketching in her notebook while lying under the oak tree in the backyard. Her room was filled with dog posters, nature books, and a growing collection of handmade bracelets, one of which she wore every day, a delicate silver chain with her initials etched into a tiny charm. That morning, she told her mom she'd take Max for a walk before breakfast. "Same route as always," she said, already grabbing the leash and slipping her arms into a hoodie. Her mom nodded from the kitchen, sipping coffee. "Don't forget we're going to Grandma's later," she called out as Lily closed the door behind her. Lily and Max made their way down Elm Street, then turned left onto Maple Trail, a well-worn path winding behind a row of houses and into a wooded park. A few joggers passed by, some waved, some didn't. One woman, pushing a stroller, would later tell police she saw Lily talking to a man in a blue jacket near the park bench, but she thought nothing of it. "It looked like a neighbor," she said. By 8:15 a.m., Max came home alone. His leash dragged behind him, frayed near the clasp. His paws were caked in mud, and a few burrs clung to his fur. He whined and scratched at the front door until Lily's mom opened it. She froze. The leash was still attached to his collar, but Lily was nowhere in sight. At first, it was confusion. Maybe she let go of the leash and Max ran off. Maybe she'd gone to the gas station or bumped into a friend. They called her cell phone, no answer. They called her friends, none had seen her. By 9 a.m., panic had fully set in. Fairview PD launched a full-scale search within hours. Officers scoured the trail, the woods, the creek that ran through the park. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters hovered low over the forest canopy. Dozens of volunteers combed through thick underbrush with sticks and flashlights. They found nothing. No blood, no torn clothing, no phone, no bracelet. The only clue came from Max. A veterinary technician suggested the burrs in his fur came from the far side of the woods, an area dense with brush and less traveled. A place locals called the Ridge, known for old, abandoned sheds and hunting blinds. Police searched there for 2 days straight. Still nothing. Rumors began to swirl. Someone from out of town? A van spotted the week before? Did she run away? But her mother was adamant. Lily would never run away. She had no reason to. She was happy. Her father, a construction foreman named Carl, didn't speak to the press. He just kept walking the trail every morning, retracing her steps, looking at the same trees, the same muddy footprints. After 2 weeks, the media moved on. After 6 months, the case went cold. Her missing person flyer stayed taped to the gas station window, sun-faded and curling at the edges. Her school yearbook left a blank spot where her photo should have been. Her bedroom stayed untouched, the covers still neatly pulled back, her sketchbook open to a half-finished drawing of Max, the bracelet box still resting on her nightstand. Every year on the anniversary, her mother lit a candle in the park. Sometimes people came. Mostly they didn't, but she never stopped lighting it. 10 years passed. 10 long, aching years. And then, one winter afternoon, in a different town, At a random checkout counter, a woman looked at a stranger's wrist and froze. There it was, that same bracelet. 10 years is a long time to live with unanswered questions. In Fairview, the absence of Lily Harmon became part of the town's identity, a silent scar that never quite healed. New families moved into the neighborhood and asked about the faded "Have you seen me?" posters. Teenagers told stories around campfires, inventing chilling variations. But for Lily's parents, it was not a legend. It was a wound that never closed. Her mother, Dana Harmon, kept the house exactly as it had been the day Lily disappeared. The front door had the same creaky hinge. The dog, Max, had passed away 5 years earlier, and Dana buried him under the oak tree where Lily used to draw. Carl, her father, had taken a night shift job in another town 2 years after the disappearance. The silence in the house had become unbearable. They were still married, but in name only. Grief had drawn them apart in ways neither of them could fully understand or fix. Every few months, a phone call or an anonymous tip would stir up old hope. "I think I saw her in Spokane. A girl on a Greyhound looked just like her." Each time, Dana would pack a bag and drive to wherever the lead pointed. Each time, she came home alone. The bracelet, Lily's silver bracelet, had never been recovered. And though it seemed small, it symbolized something to Dana. "If someone took her," she told police once, "they'd have taken that off first." She never took it off. Never. Then came the day that shattered everything again. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon in mid-January when Hannah Price, a middle school English teacher and a former Fairview resident, was standing in line at a cafe in Ashland, a town 3 hours away. She was waiting behind a man who looked about 30, casually dressed, arms resting on the counter while chatting with the barista. At first, nothing struck her as unusual, until he reached out to grab his coffee, and she saw it. The bracelet. It was unmistakable. Thin silver chain, slightly worn charm, the initials LH etched in delicate cursive. Hannah's heart skipped. She told herself it couldn't be. She hadn't seen that bracelet in a decade. Still, she couldn't look away. The man walked to a corner booth, sipping his drink while scrolling his phone. His coat was damp, his boots muddy. His face was tired, unshaven, not threatening exactly, but rough. Hannah walked to her car in a daze. For several minutes, she sat staring through the windshield, hands trembling. Then she did what her instincts told her to do. She wrote down his license plate. 2 days later, that note was on Detective Aaron Mullen's desk at the Fairview Police Department. Aaron had inherited Lily's cold case just 6 months prior. She was new to town, mid-30s, and persistent, one of the few who had reviewed every file from the beginning. She had mapped out the last known movements, cross-checked old tips, even tried contacting private DNA labs for help with minor evidence recovered years ago. But this was the first real lead in years. The man from the cafe was identified as Paul Landon, 33 years old, originally from upstate Washington, currently working freelance construction jobs and living out of a small camper parked near the outskirts of Ashland. No criminal record, no direct link to Lily Harmon, no apparent reason to own a bracelet with her initials. Mullins drove to Ashland and found the camper, an old white trailer parked under a thicket of trees behind an abandoned warehouse. She watched it from a distance for over an hour. No movement. Eventually, she knocked. Paul answered groggily, blinking against the gray afternoon light. He was polite but cautious, letting her in only after she showed her badge. Inside was sparse: a cot, a hot plate, a duffel bag, and a small drawer built into the wall. On the counter sat a tiny ceramic dish. Inside was the bracelet. When asked where he got it, he hesitated. "It was a gift," he said, "from a woman I used to know." Mullins leaned forward. "What was her name?" He shook his head. "I don't know. She never said. We met in the hills up north around Eugene. She was quiet, wary, looked like she'd been through something. I helped her fix a flat tire once. She stayed with me for a few nights. And then she was gone, left in the middle of the night. No note, just gone." The bracelet was still on the table. Mullins studied his face. He wasn't lying, or if he was very good at it. But his description was vague. No photo, no fingerprints, no name, just a face burned into his memory. She had long hair, brown, pale, kept looking over her shoulder like someone was following her. It was a fragment, a shadow of a lead, but it was more than they'd had in years. Detective Mullins returned to Fairview with the bracelet sealed in an evidence bag and a surge of momentum in her chest she hadn't felt in months. But momentum in cold cases was fragile, like smoke. One bad lead or false memory and it all vanished. Still, the man's story, vague as it was, suggested one thing clearly. Someone, possibly Lily, had been alive long after her disappearance. Back at the station, she reopened everything. Satellite maps of Oregon, timelines, phone logs from the days before Lily vanished. The old case files hadn't aged well. Handwritten notes, grainy photos, witness statements riddled with contradictions. But one thing had always bothered her: the lack of surveillance footage. Even though it was 2013 when Lily disappeared, there should have been something from traffic cams, businesses near the trail entrance, or neighboring homes. But either the systems were down, overwritten, or too distant to be useful. She needed help, someone who knew the area from a personal angle. That's when she called Carl Harmon. It had been over a year since he'd spoken with police. He was wary, tired of false hope. But when Mullins told him they had recovered Lily's bracelet, and that a man claimed to have received it from a woman who matched Lily's age and demeanor, his silence cracked. "She had a tiny scar on her collarbone," Carl said when they met, "from falling off her bike when she was 6. It's not in the reports. But if someone ever saw her again, that's what you'd look for. You'd only notice it if she was wearing something sleeveless." He gave Mullins a stack of photos she hadn't seen before. Lily at family BBQs, brushing Max's fur, carving a pumpkin, sitting in the back seat of a truck grinning with a juice box in hand. These were clearer than the few grainy images the department had stored. She scanned each one, noting posture, hairstyle, shape of the jawline. She fed them into facial recognition software, running a match through DMV photos, hospital records, even state databases of shelters and transitional housing. 2 days later, a ping came back. It was weak, only a 72% match, and it was from a hospital intake form in a town called Elk Hollow, just over the border in Northern California. A Jane Doe had checked into the ER in 2017 with a broken wrist and a black eye. She gave no name. The hospital kept her for 48 hours. Then she vanished without a trace. No police report, no fingerprints taken. The hospital had only one photo, a blurry security camera still from the waiting room. A young woman, wrapped in a hoodie, hair messy, face angled down. But Mullins saw it instantly, the chin, the eyes. Could be her. She printed the image and brought it to Dana. The woman's hands shook as she held the photo. "It's her," she whispered. "She's older, but it's her." With the bracelet and the Jane Doe image, Mullins finally had enough to file for a subpoena, not for Paul Landon, but for traffic cameras and toll logs from the week he claimed to have met the mystery woman. It took another week to sort through digital data, but eventually, she found a single toll booth log showing his camper entering a stretch of highway near Eugene, timestamped just 2 days before he claimed the woman stayed with him. It wasn't proof, but it was pressure. Mullins returned to Ashland and asked Paul to sit down again, this time at the police substation. He agreed reluctantly. "I told you everything I know," he repeated. "You told me she was scared. Do you know why?" Paul leaned back, his jaw tight. "She wouldn't say, but she flinched when headlights passed the camper. She didn't sleep much. She kept asking me if I ever heard of a man called Marcus." Mullins froze. "Marcus?" Paul nodded. "Said he drove a red truck. That he used to watch her and the dog from behind the trees. I didn't ask more. I didn't want to scare her off. It was the first time that name had entered the case. Marcus." Mullins ran it through the original files. One witness had once mentioned seeing a red truck parked near the trailhead in the days before Lily vanished. The lead went nowhere at the time, no license plate, no clear identity. Just a red pickup. She began digging. In 2013, a man named Marcus Weller owned a red Ford F-150 registered in a town 2 hours from Fairview. He'd been a seasonal worker at a landscaping company that sometimes serviced the homes near Maple Trail. No criminal record. No arrests. But something stood out. 6 months after Lily's disappearance, he abruptly moved out of state. No forwarding address. His name disappeared from Oregon records. But in 2016, a traffic citation placed him in California. Then again in 2020, Mullins was building a puzzle, and the edges were starting to form. She filed for a background trace, contacted police in the counties where Weller had resurfaced. She reached out to victim services and asked local officers to quietly observe his residence. 3 days later, she got a call. A patrol unit had seen him leave his home, wearing a red flannel shirt, and more importantly, with a young woman sitting in the passenger seat. Pale, quiet, looking over her shoulder. Detective Mullins didn't wait. Within hours, she coordinated with local law enforcement in Mendocino County to surveil the man identified as Marcus Weller. She reviewed everything again: the red truck, the bracelet, the sighting in the cafe, the Jane Doe photo. There was no time for slow processes or cautious hesitation. If that woman in the truck was Lily, and all signs pointed that way, then she was alive and she was with a man who may have been her captor for the last 10 years. The house Weller rented was secluded, partially hidden behind old trees and thick shrubs at the end of a dirt road. His truck, a faded red F-150 with Oregon plates long expired, was parked under a makeshift carport. The patrol unit confirmed he lived alone. No one else in town knew much about him. "Keeps to himself," the neighbors said. "Strange eyes. Never smiles." For 48 hours they watched. Each time Marcus left, he was alone. Each time he returned, he checked the side mirrors obsessively. The young woman hadn't reappeared since that first sighting. Then, on the third evening, she stepped out. She was older now, in her mid-20s, and thinner than Lily Harmon had been. Her hair was longer, sun-damaged, partially covering one eye. She wore a jacket too big for her, sleeves hanging down over her hands. But as she walked across the porch to throw something into a trash bin, a breeze pushed back her hair. The scar. The same faint mark Carl Harmon had described, visible just above the collarbone. It was her. Mullins authorized the operation. In the early hours of the next morning, officers surrounded the house. Weller was taken into custody without resistance, his expression blank, like he'd been expecting it for years. Inside the house, the young woman stood frozen in the hallway, barefoot, her arms wrapped around herself. "Lily," Mullins said softly, stepping forward. The girl's eyes widened. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, barely above a whisper, "He told me no one was looking anymore." Mullins nodded. He lied. The recovery was delicate. Lily was transported to a nearby hospital, where a trauma unit evaluated her. She hadn't been enrolled in school, had no identification, no medical records post 2013. Her nutrition was poor. She'd developed asthma from living in moldy conditions. But physically, she was alive. Mentally, it would take time. She told parts of her story slowly, in pieces. Weller had followed her for weeks before the abduction. He waited until a rainy day when the trail was mostly empty, parked his truck near the south entrance, and watched as she walked Max into the woods. He called the dog by name, pretending to be someone from the neighborhood. When she turned, he grabbed her. "The first few days were a blur," she said. She remembered screaming inside the camper, tied to a bed frame, Weller telling her that no one cared, that her parents had moved on, that the world had forgotten her. He changed their location often, never staying longer than a month. Sometimes he worked construction, sometimes odd jobs. She was hidden in attics, basements, even a crawl space under a cabin in Idaho. The bracelet was the only thing she held on to. She kept it hidden in her shoe or tucked into seams of fabric. One day, while he was gone, she left it behind on purpose, in Paul Landon's camper. I didn't know if he'd find it, but he was kind. I thought maybe. Weller never suspected. He thought she'd simply lost it. She never tried to escape again after that. For years, she lived under the belief that if she ran, no one would believe her, or worse, no one would want her. Weller had poisoned her with lies. "They forgot about you," he said once. "You're mine now." But Paul hadn't forgotten, and neither had the woman in the cafe, nor Detective Mullins, who refused to treat the case as closed, even after a decade. The media exploded. Missing teen found alive after 10 years. Bracelet clue leads to break in cold case. Man arrested in connection with Fairview disappearance. Dana and Carl were reunited with their daughter in a quiet hospital room. No cameras, no reporters, just them holding her hands like they did when she was a child. There were tears, but no words could undo the time stolen. It would take months, maybe years, to rebuild what was lost. Marcus Weller was charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, multiple counts of assault, and psychological abuse. He pleaded not guilty. His trial drew nationwide attention, but Lily chose not to attend. Instead, she moved with her parents to a small coastal town to start again. Her name was kept out of the news from that point forward. For her protection, she began therapy, adopted a dog. She wore her bracelet again, and some nights, she'd sit on the porch, staring at the stars, remembering the girl she used to be. The one who walked Max down Maple Trail, never knowing how far from home she'd be taken, but also never knowing how far hope could reach to bring her back.